Hello, Fat Puppy here. Welcome to my channel. That is Very Handsome Stone, and y'all are in for a doozy of a story. Hang on tight. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. There's a bell notification. If you click that, when new videos come out, you'll be notified. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Spread the word. This really is a beautiful marker of the family plot of the family of China. I had to reposition myself because of the sun shining directly in my face and making it hard for me to see the screen. But my fear is that the stone right there of Dr. China might be washed out in sunlight. I hope it's not. I hope you can see it well. Mrs. Louisa China is buried in a different plot. Well, I can understand the China family not wanting her buried with their son, their brother. Can't say their daddy because that didn't really have no bearing on it. She's buried in a Delorme family plot, and I noticed she is the second oldest tombstone in this plot. Now, I don't know if she was related to the Delormes, particularly since she come out of Colombia, or if this was just a family friend that's sympathetic to her cause. I do know that I also read that even at age 57, she was considered a very handsome woman. This was the terminology used back then. And now for the story. Dr. Archie China was born in 1864. His dad was a doctor, actually an assistant surgeon in the Civil War. Now, a surgeon in Civil War chopped off limbs is basically what they did. You know, they didn't have anything to stop infection, so if a person got shot or half blown up, a lot of times they just lost arms and legs over it to keep from dying from infection. So this was his dad. He was a surgeon, a doctor. Well, so Dr. China, who obviously also became a doctor, he graduated from the Citadel in 1886. He was of the first graduating class after the Civil War. The Citadel had closed, then opened back up, and he was of that graduating class. Louisa Davis, who became his bride, was a beautiful young lady who came from a prominent family from Columbia, South Carolina. They had a long marriage, but it was one that ended in disaster, in the death of both of them. So I'm going to give you an account of what happened. So, first thing, Mrs. China accused Mr. China of messing around with a nurse at the hospital. I have the nurse's name, but for fear that Mrs. China might not have been right, I'm not going to say it, even though this was, 100 years ago. Mr. China was known to be abusive towards his wife, not physically, but mentally. He would belittle her in front of people, and it was well known around town that he might be messing around on Mrs. China. She accused him. They had a huge argument. It was January. He locked her out of the house. Of course, she didn't cotton too well to this. Next day, she come back home. This time she brought a pistol with her. It was a .32 revolver. So she says, because she was the one that survived this, that she confronted him, they struggled with the gun, he got shot twice and died in the bathroom. Now, she may have had her reasons to shoot him. It wasn't the right thing to do, but I believe that she had a reason. There are people that are sympathy to her cause, is basically what I'm trying to say. Problem is that according to her story, they struggled and he was shot. Now, I know I'm not a detective and I'm not in forensics, but if people are struggling with a gun, they tend to get shot up here or here. But he was not. He was shot straight down the top of his head and then straight down here. Straight down shots. I don't really think there was a struggle. I'm not here to judge her though. I'm just here to tell what happened. Now, I read several newspaper accounts that were printed at that time as to what happened. There was so first off, about 24 hours later, they had an adopted daughter. Louisa was also her name, and I'm assuming she was around 11 years old, who I guess spent the night off with friends. When she come home, she found her mama passed out on the bed. She couldn't get her mama up, so she went running to a nurse who lived next door and got her. This nurse came and called the doctor while she was on the way, Dr. Stuckey. Dr. Stuckey arrives. They're in the upstairs bedroom. Dr. Stuckey arrives and tells the nurse, go into the bathroom and get some cold rags. So the nurse goes in there and discovers the body of Dr. China shot. So there she is, passed out in the bed. They finally revive her. There was an inquest held. She was accused of malingering by her doctor. Honestly, I had to look that up and see what it meant. Basically, the doctor was saying she was faking. She wasn't passed out. She did that for sympathy and to add to her story that she really don't know what happened other than they struggled with the gun. The inquest was held. By the way, there was 2,000 people that show up at that funeral. Now, Sumter is not a big city now, and it certainly wasn't then. 2,000 people showed up for the funeral of Dr. China. Meanwhile, Mrs. China got a touch of pneumonia from being locked outside. Mrs. China died from pneumonia, double pneumonia, 5 days later. Only 5 days later, and she was dead herself. So as I understand it, the inquest was held. This was held while she was still alive. At some point, you know, she died 5 days later. So I guess at some point they decided there was no point in going to trial. And as a headline read that I found, death takes Sumter's tragic case before the Supreme Court of the universe. This was the headlines in the Greenville News, January 12, 1924. There was a reckoning. There's always a reckoning. Justice is served. Sometimes we don't see it, but I believe justice is always served. The daughter had been adopted 11 years earlier as a little child, a little girl. So I'm assuming she's somewhere between 11 and 15 years old when she found her mom supposedly passed out in the bed. So I always ask, what happened? What happened next? The daughter got married, and I think moved to Atlanta. She herself became a nurse. I actually found where her daughter, that'd be Dr. China's granddaughter, was also a nurse who passed away about 5 years ago and had plenty of children. This whole story is what movies are made out of. I mean, you have murder and then the death of the murderess, if you want to use that word. You have intrigue, doctors, you know, soap operas are made of doctors and nurses. You have adultery, messing around. Like I said, this is the things that movies are made of.